Specifically, they say the board of 23 citizens, which reviews reports of alleged police misconduct, is riddled, they say, with conflicts of interest. It is called the Citizens Review Board on Police Practices. As NBC7 Investigates reporter Maury Payton found out, the former members say the board is rigged against the very citizens it is supposed to protect.
The Citizens Review Board was approved by voters in 1988, a time of tension for the city after a San Diego Police Department officer was killed after a young black man shot him during a fight in southeast San Diego. The board's designed to independently weigh in on accusations of SDPD officers accused of unprofessional behavior. Tonight, former board members are warning the public the review may not be as independent as people think. Police and protesters went head-to-head at the Occupy San Diego protests in January 2012. Stephanie Jennings was there to show her support for the protesters, but the 50-year-old ended up flat on her back.
They claim that I bumped into him.
Jennings is talking about this officer who she claims pushed her.
He did one of those football shoves where he used all of his body and all of his weight, and he just shoved me on my back, and I just went flying.
Jennings says the officer arrested her and took her to jail, but Jennings and other protesters fought back.
We filed 17 complaints with the Citizens Review Board on behalf of 17 different arrests.
NBC7 Investigates has learned more than 3 years after those complaints were filed, the board has not reviewed a single one. San Diego City Council, though, did approve a $60,000 payment to Jennings to settle her legal claim against SDPD. Proof Jennings says her complaint was credible and deserved the review board's full attention.
If I can't get answers to things, how can somebody who is poor and living in a community where they don't have access to attorneys and things like that ever have a chance for justice?
Lucy Pearson, a former member of the board, says that's a problem for the board designed to review police practices.
I brought up several times
I can't get
community
answers to
does not trust the CRB, and it's, grown time. They don't want to hear that.
Pearson was the board's only Latina. She describes herself as blunt and outspoken, unafraid to ask tough questions at board meetings, and willing to criticize police.
There are still some that shouldn't be police officers, and that's not my opinion. You just have to read the headlines.
She says her outspokenness didn't sit well with the mayor's office, which declined to reappoint her after serving 7 years on the board.
If I see something is wrong, I'll speak up, which has apparently gotten me into trouble.
Bonetta Buell-Wilson served 6 years on the review board and, like Pearson, was not reappointed this year. Buell-Wilson and Pearson claim she says her transparency and decision-making in secret stifles dissent between members and the city. The Citizens Review Board receives complaints 2 ways. SDPD Internal Affairs launches an investigation, and their findings and recommendations are selectively forwarded to the Citizens Review Board. Or citizens can file complaints, and those are forwarded to SDPD Internal Affairs, then selectively forwarded to the board. The board's leadership is then supposed to determine, without any outside influences, which board members review which cases.
Certain people seem to be getting certain cases.
Buell-Wilson and Pearson say board members who are, quote, pro-police get the more serious cases, depriving the complaining citizens of a fair hearing. NBC7 Investigates submitted a public records request to the city, asking for details about cases reviewed during the past 2 years. The city has not responded to the request.
Everyone that's on the board.
The former board members also say there's a huge conflict of interest in the role the city attorney plays as the board's legal advisor. According to them, the deputy city attorney, Mike Giordino, is compromised because in his position, his office must always protect the city's interest. And that means protecting the police department, siding with officers instead of citizens to insulate the city from possible lawsuits.
That was one of the things that set him off at the last meeting, was because he was asked, if there is a conflict, how is it resolved? And he wouldn't answer.
The deputy city attorney's primary client, obviously, is the city of San Diego.
Attorney Ed McIntyre is an expert in legal ethics and professional responsibility. He agrees with Wilson and Pearson that the city attorney's office has a conflict.
It's clearly in the interests of the city that the officer's conduct be deemed justified. The board should have independent legal advice, free from any dual representation of the interests of the city.
The city declined a request for a non-camera interview. In a statement to NBC7 Investigates, Jerry Braun with the city attorney's office said the city's charter requires their office to be the legal advisor. Braun also declined to talk on camera, but says it's about policy, not ethics, and the attorney is walled off from other issues. Buell, Wilson, and Pearson say something has to change in order to restore the board's credibility.
It's not an independent board. I think it's a facade of a board. It's not what people what they voted for, and I don't think that that's what they're getting.
And Maury tells us discussions between internal affairs and the board are confidential, but issues the board is debating and case outcomes are made public. Earlier this year, the board rules changed the role of executive director and city employee Charmaine Mosley. Both Pearson and Buell Wilson say it is another attempt to control the outcome of CRB findings. In an email to NBC7 Investigates, Mosley said there have not been substantive changes to her role, which is to facilitate the work of the board.